It is just a huge, huge honor for me today to be podcast interviewing Dr. Nate Lawson, who completed a DMD PhD program in the field of dental materials at the University of Alabama under the mentorship of John O. Burgess. After a stint in private practice, he returned to University of Alabama in 2014 to teach and perform clinical and laboratory testing in dental materials. In 2016, he became the director of the Division of Biomaterials and the program director of the Biomaterials Residency Program at UAB. He performs research for most of the major dental manufacturers to test the properties of new dental materials, both in the laboratory and in the clinic. He has written over 150 published journal articles, textbook chapters, and abstracts. He serves on the editorial board of Compendium, Dental Products Review, and the Journal of Adhesive Dentistry, and was recently elected to the ADA Council of Scientific Affairs. He was the 2017 recipient of the 3M Innovative Research Award and the 2016 Stanford New Investigator Award, both from the ADA. He lectures nationally and internationally on the topics of dental ceramics and direct restorative materials. He works as a general dentist in the UAB faculty practice. He can be reached through his website at drnatelawson.com, or you can follow him like I do on Instagram at DentalTube. It is a huge honor to have you on the show today, Nate. How are you doing?
Great. Thanks so much, Howard. Thanks so much for having me.
Well, my gosh, you're 35. I'm 56, so I'm 21 years older than you. I could be your dad. I'm telling you, when I was your age, the new thing was PFM. And I never, 30 years ago, thought I would live old enough to see that come and go. Kind of like Dell Computers, you know, it was the biggest IPO, and now it's not even publicly traded. So I'm wondering to you, what is my PFM to you? What is growing now that you think probably won't even be there in 30 years?
Oh, wow. Okay. That's, well, you know, it's funny going back to that, you know, to the original, what you were saying, like with the PFM, even, so I graduated from dental school in 2011. And when I graduated, I had done one all ceramic crown. And now when we look at our dental students now, I mean, you know, they're doing a ton of full contour zirconia crowns. I mean, I would say predominantly full contour zirconia crowns, and I could probably count on like one hand how many PFM crowns that I've done since I've been in the faculty practice. So yes, I think it's, if you look at some of the numbers, like I think there's a something from Gordon Christensen that was published in JADA in 2008. Glidewell was, I think, doing about 24% of their restorations were all ceramic. And then when you jump to 2013, it's about 78% of the restoration. So it's like,
say those numbers again. What year was the first year you said?
So in 2008, I think it was about a quarter of the crowns they were doing were all ceramic. And then when you go to 2013, it was about 3/4 of the crowns they were doing were all ceramic.
Wow.
So 5-year jump where we saw just this big increase in the number of all ceramic crowns that were being made. And yeah, even for someone like me who graduated in 2011, I mean, I wasn't trained in doing all ceramic crowns, and we had lectures about them, and I didn't do a lot of them when I graduated. And now, I mean, that's predominantly all that I do. So it's kind of crazy to me how quickly that transition happened, and then, you know, and even to think how recently that transition happened. But yeah, as far as things that are changing rapidly, I mean, I feel like now when I'm looking at this, going to Chicago Midwinter meeting and some of these meetings, these digital dentures seem to be so huge. In all the lectures about digital dentures, I was at a digital denture lecture maybe about 2 weeks ago, listening about that. Not something I work a lot in myself, but it's crazy to see. I feel like that's one of the big new hot trends of 2019.
Does that mean you follow Denture Queen on Instagram?
Yeah, we shared a cab one time before I knew that she was Denture Queen, and then I saw I actually watched your guys' podcast, and I follow her on Instagram as well, and yeah, she's got some really cool stuff.
Well, you know, it always comes down to you know, you have the very rich dentists treating the lifestyles of the rich and famous, then you have the whole flyover middle country. Like, you know, I was born in Kansas, went to undergrad in Nebraska, went to dental school in Missouri. Now I'm living in Phoenix, which is the Florida of the West. And so, you know, Henry Ford said, you make a car for the masses, you'll get so richly with the classes, and you make a car for the classes, you'll be like the other 85 car companies that have come and gone. So it always comes down to, that is digital dentures bleeding edge, high price, or is it actually do the 5-finger rule, making it faster, easier, higher quality, lower cost, and more miniature? Do you think digital dentures is bleeding, high cost, high tech lovers love it? Or do you think it's really for the working man to get a better denture at a better price?
I think it's starting to, the first time I'd heard about it, there was somebody lecturing about digital dentures at the dental school, and she was going through and showing the steps, and it seemed so complicated. I couldn't, wrap my head around what was going on. And again, now I do very few dentures, so it's something that clinically I wasn't paying attention to as much as thinking about how to incorporate it in my practice. But as I listened to the steps, I thought, okay, this is something that actually makes sense to me, something that, and the final products that they were showing looked like they were pretty good. Depending on how they were fabricating them. But it does seem like it's just like anything, the first time that I saw, we used to have these old CEREC 3s in the dental school, and to watch one of those things work, I thought, I would never want to do that. And then now, if you have like a Trios or an Omnicam, or look at one of those, it's so much simpler to use, and the technology has come so far. So I think that that's what's happening with digital dentures. Like,
dude, I bought a CEREC 1 in 1989, and it was worse than my temporaries that I could make in 5 minutes. Oh my God, it's come so far. So I want my first question to you is, naturopaths are really taking off because about a quarter of America has lost all faith in government, in institutions like the CDC and the World Health. They're anti-vax, and a lot of them are just anti-metal. And I see a lot of people saying we're going to do metal-free crowns, and then they're doing zirconia all day long. When you look at the periodic table, is zirconia a metal, or is it not?
That's a good question, Howard. So a funny story about that was I was out lecturing in DC, and I had one of my friends come up to me afterwards, and she had told me a kind of funny story where she had been seen a lecturer who had come and said that zirconia was a metal. They said it wasn't a ceramic. Zirconia is actually a metal, and you should treat it like that. And she went home and she started billing out all of her full contour zirconia crowns as metal crowns based on that lecture. But it's definitely it's not a metal. My background was in engineering, so if I was sitting there in my first day of engineering class, in Engineering 101, my professor would have said everything in this world, everything we could feel and touch, has made up of three things. They could be a metal, a polymer, or it can be a ceramic. So ceramics are just a very basic kind of material. It's a combination of a metallic and non-metallic element. And so there's materials that are like
what are
aluminum.
The three things? What are the three things? It could be what?
So the three types of materials that are metals, polymers, and ceramics. So ceramics is just a very basic kind of material. It's usually something that's a heat insulator, electrical insulator. It's also brittle materials, and they're composed of metallic and non-metallic elements. And so this is something I learned when I was in grad school from a guy who was in grad school with me, and he taught me this kind of neat nomenclature thing. So like zirconium is a metal. It's a shiny, lustrous metal, and it looks like a metal. But zirconia is a ceramic. It's a combination. It's zirconium dioxide. So it's a combination of zirconium and oxygen. And sometimes that's confusing. The one that I think is easy to remember, if you think of like aluminum, like an aluminum can, we know that aluminum is a metal. It's a shiny, lustrous metal, like aluminum foil or aluminum can. And that's a metal as compared to alumina, which was like what the old Procera crowns were made out of, and alumina is a ceramic. So same thing, zirconium is a metal, and zirconium dioxide is zirconia, which is a ceramic material.
And then what would a polymer be? A temporary?
Yeah, like a resin, like the resin in our composites, or the polyvinyl siloxane, or so many of our materials, are actually polymer materials, and the metals we got a lot of those as well. So, but yeah, at first I thought that was just like a silly nomenclature thing until I had the story with my friend who had told me about billing out all of these metal or zirconia crowns as metal crowns. I thought that was kind of funny, the danger of misinformation and in the CE course. So,
well, it's really tough. One of the viewers on Dentistry Uncensored sent me an email, howard@dentaltown.com, and she was asking me if she thought water fluoridation, she knew that I fluoridated Phoenix in 89 with Jack Dillenberg, and she's asking me if she should do it to her city, and I said, well, the truth be, 1/4 of Americans have lost all faith, all trust. They think, I mean, these people were telling me that fluoride is so toxic that when it's a byproduct of the mining, and it's so toxic they have nowhere to put it. So they bribed the government to slowly pour it in our drinking water because there's no other place they can put it. And I said, well, why don't they put it where they exploded 1,850 nuclear bombs? I imagine you could sprinkle some fluoride juice in some sites in New Mexico and Utah. I mean, so it's tough. And on this metal thing and vaccines, do you think ceramic implants are going to take off because of the demand by holistic people that don't want metal?
I don't. The thing that makes me nervous about a zirconia implant is still just the brittleness of the material. I don't know. I mean, that's not something that we've ever looked into, and I know that is something. I was at the Holistic Dental Association last year, and I heard them talking. There are vendors there with the ceramic implants, but from a mechanical standpoint, it makes me a little bit nervous. So
my buddies here in town in Phoenix that have sunk 10,000 implants. That's what they say. They don't want the brittleness, the fracture. They don't want to removing them. They have no interest in them, but if money is the answer, what's the question? I've noticed all the big implant players, Straumann, all of them have bought a ceramic implant company. They all have one in their supply catalog now.
Huh. Yeah, no, that's something we've looked into, to be honest. But yeah, and it's funny that you go back, going back to the water fluoridation. I just saw that they had republished, because one of the things we talk about here in the dental school is a lot of dental students are very pro fluoride, and then we have the discussion about what are the advantages of fluoridating the water supply if you have 1,000 parts per million in your toothpaste versus having 1 part per million in your drinking water. But then we go back to this issue of, maybe it's the people that don't have the access to the fluoridated toothpaste that need the water fluoridation the most, and the topical benefits of water fluoride.
Exactly. Ding, 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 ding. That's what I always tell everybody. The middle class doesn't drink water out of the fountain. When I grew up in Kansas, the most tasty, delicious drink in the world was out of your garden hose. It was hot outside. You turned on the hose. That's not reality. All the middle class drinks bottled water. And so who's drinking fluoridated water? The bottom 20%. They're in public schools. They didn't brush their teeth before they went to school. And so it's just, do you want to give them fluoridated water and prevent decay at 15 cents a year per person, or do you want to pay $500 through Medicare and Medicaid, giving some kid a couple pulpotomies and chrome steel crowns? I'm a big fan of you, and you say there's 3 types of zirconia. What do my homies listening? And when I talk about this, I want to be clear. I always tell you, leave a comment in the YouTube section. Give me your name or your age or what country you're from, or email me howard@dentaltown.com. And they're 25% of all the emails are from dental school. The rest are all 30 and under. Only one guy a week sends me an email, says he's as old as me. And when you look at these kids, when they come out of dental school, 80% of all their dentistry is going to be on the 4 first-year molars. I mean, what tooth is most likely to get an MOD, filling, a crown, a root canal, an extraction, an implant? So when I just podcasted the Delta CEO from Rhode Island. I mean, those guys do $1 billion a year in insurance. But when you look at insurance claims over the 32 teeth, it's just 4 huge spikes on the 4 6-year molars. So on a 6-year molar, what do my homies need to know? What types of zirconia on there? And talk about, their first molar. They're going to do an MOD. composite or an inlay or a crown? So what are the different types of zirconia?
Okay, so yeah, that's a great question. So, when we talk about that, 2013, when we looked at the 78% of single unit crowns that were being done by Glidewell were being done out of all ceramic materials. The type of zirconia that was being done back then was the kind of what I actually call that a second generation of zirconia. That was when we had these the one that everyone knows is Bruxer, and was the full contour zirconia crown. I call that second generation because there's actually a first generation of zirconia, which was the zirconia that you had to put feldspathic porcelain over, so like a lava frame material. And those materials weren't considered full contour because they they were considered just too white opaque to be used as a full contour crown. So the Bruxer generation, the ones that are Bruxer, Lava Plus, those kinds of zirconia materials, what I call second generation.
And what was the first generation one called?
First generation would be like a framework zirconia, like a lava frame, I think was an example of that, and it's something that you had to put feldspathic porcelain over. Okay. And the change was, getting into the science of the change was they took out some of the alumina content. There was 0.25% alumina in the first one, and the second one went to about 0.05% alumina. So they took out some of this alumina, made it a little bit more translucent, and that was the kind of the Bruxer, Lava Plus generation of zirconia. Okay. And then I would say about 5 or 6 years later, they started coming out with these newer generations of zirconia that were even more translucent, what they were calling anterior or translucent zirconia. So materials that were thought to have this they were kind of made to compete with Emacs, something that you could put in for an anterior monolithic restoration. And when the first ones that come out was Bruxer anterior, Katana UTML, Katana STML, Lava aesthetic materials. These were all the more translucent versions of zirconia. The change there was they increased this molecule called yttria. They went from a 3 mol % yttria, which was in the Bruxer type zirconias, to a 5 mol % yttria. So these are a whole different microstructure. Like if you looked at an SEM of a crown that was made from these newer types of zirconia, it looks totally different. The grains are larger, and it's got cubic zirconia in it. The same thing. The same kind of cubic zirconia that you'd have in a fake diamond. Well, that cubic zirconia is in the newer types of zirconia crowns. That's what makes them a little bit more translucent. So I call these the third generation of zirconia. So the first, again, was that framework that had a porcelain over it. The second was the ones like a Bruxer crown that was a monolithic full contour crown, and but it was still kind of white opaque. And then the third generations are these more translucent, or even more translucent zirconia crowns that they say could be used for an anterior type of restoration. So
on Glidewell, are they still mostly doing second generation Bruxer, or what is their third generation anterior translucent zirconia called?
So their third gen would be like the Bruxer anterior. That's what they're calling it. Was Bruxer that's what they called their Bruxer anterior. And the most yeah. And so would you and then Ivoclar, they have their what is Ivoclar's? Their Xenostar. Mm-hmm. Is that their Xenostar zirconium system? I should know this because I was just out there that's 2 weeks ago. Oh, yeah. You went up to Buffalo. Guy, you went the wrong time of year, man. Never go to Buffalo in the winter. Holy guacamole. Yeah. First time I went there, I swear to God, the Niagara Falls, it was like almost completely frozen over. But back to so do you take Glidewell's advice where that anterior zirconium is for anterior, but use regular Bruxer on the 4 6-year molars? Yeah, so I mean, for my patients in Alabama, for the bar for molar aesthetics isn't very high. So I mean, a second generation is I think more than good enough. I mean, it's a little wide opaque, but I think for posterior units, and particularly if there's any posterior bridges, the second generation is totally cool. And then maybe moving a little bit more anteriorly is when I think about doing an anterior zirconia, or a 5Y, or the ones containing cubic, the ones like the Bruxer anterior, Katana, UTML, STML type crown. So,
but wouldn't these people that just came out of dental school and they got an associate job and they're doing, they need to get 100 molar crowns under their belt? I mean, it's just going to take some time for them. But wouldn't you rather be cementing a Bruxer on a first-year molar than bonding lithium disilicate on a molar? I mean, doesn't the bonding an Emacs on a first molar bring a lot more complications and possible problems with isolation, following the instructions? When these guys are bonding, you can stand behind 100 dentists and only see one guy with a timer. That's what I learned when I went up to Ivoclar. They were saying, when we say brush this on for 10 seconds, we really mean 10 seconds. And all the hardcore guys like, so would you recommend cementing a Bruxer over bonding on a first molar, especially since these people don't follow the instructions? They're a doctor of everything. They mix kits. That blows my mind. Yeah. They use a bonding agent from a 3M kit and a composite from an Ivoclar or Ultradent. And I'm like, are you sure someone with a DMD PhD like Nate has signed off on this new technique?
Yeah, so there's this, I have to promote this a little bit because my department chairman is the head of this thing called the Practice-Based Research Network, and I think you might have had someone from them on the show. And so they did a survey where they just sent out a survey to a couple thousand dentists and asked them for a first molar crown, if you had to pick your restorative material, what material would you choose? And by far I wouldn't say by far, I think it was about 30% of the dentists were choosing full contour zirconia, 30% were doing PFM, and then a smaller, I think it was around 17% were doing Emacs for the first molar. So yes, I think it's far more common to do a zirconia crown for that first molar. And we just recently did a kind of follow-up with that where we looked at between zirconia and Emacs, how many of people were bonding versus cementing them. So with Emacs, it was 70% of people that were using that material were bonding it, and zirconia is about the exact opposite. Only 30% of people were bonding the zirconia crown. So I mean, since most people are cementing them, it does make it a lot more. It makes it a lot easier to if you're going to cement that. And I think a big thing too with cementing and bonding is part of it is technique, but the other thing is isolation. So I mean, if you're trying to do a first molar crown or any part of or any tooth in the posterior mandible, trying to keep isolation for bonding that crown can be challenging. So I mean, we all think about isolation when we're doing composites, but when we think about bonding a crown, that's also a resin. So we're trying to achieve isolation while we're doing that technique. And I think I saw the study that I always quote that I think is really interesting, and that is if you're going to be bonding to dentin, like if you're bonding a crown, if you bond to uncontaminated surface, if you get really good isolation, if you use a resin cement, you get a much higher bond than if you're using an RMGI. But as soon as you get contamination on there, actually your RMGI has got a better bond than the resin cement because the bond is just completely destroyed by that salivary contamination. So I think that's for the posterior part of the mouth.
And so much of that is culture. I mean, I'm convinced so much of what everybody believes is just what their culture is, what they're born into, their language, their politics. I mean, I see glass ionomer huge in Australia, New Zealand, Japan, and I just don't see it in the United States. And why do you think North America is so different with glass ionomer than Southeast Asia?
Oh, yeah, I have to say, when I graduated from dental school, I hadn't used a lot of RMGI or GI you're talking for direct restoratives.
Yeah.
I think for talking for cementation, I think RMGI cements are by far the more popular type of cement. But as far as restoratives, it's not as common. I wasn't taught a lot about doing direct restoratives with RMGI or GIs when I was in school. And actually, I used to work in this practice up in Chicago, and I'd see all these kids come in with these restorations in their mouths, and from the dental school up there, and I'd be looking at them, and I said, this is a really challenging patient. How are they able to place restoration in this kid? And I didn't realize, it took me a while to realize they were placing a lot of GIs and RMGIs in the primary dentition. And when you can't get great isolation down at the for some of these class 5 restorations, using an RMGI and GI material is great. So I don't know. We just weren't. I think that they're teaching it more now, but I don't know.
So if she's driving to work right now and she says, Nate, just tell me, if you were going to cement a zirconium on a 6-year molar or a Emacs on a 6-year molar, what would you cement a Bruxer with, and what would you bond a Emacs with? What's your choice cement for Bruxer on a 1st-year molar? If you were going to cement it.
So on a 1st-year molar, I mean, basically with me, if I'm doing a Bruxer or Zirconia crown, I'm going to go with an RMGI cement most of the time. So
name one. Give them a name. They get mad at me when guests don't give a specific. They want me to hold your feet to the fire and say, give me the actual name.
So I think the 2 most common would be we have Relax Luting Plus at the school.
You have what?
From 3. Relax Luting Plus.
Okay, 3M.
And then the Fuji Sem is the other really popular RMGI cement, which we've tested them both, and they're pretty similar. And then something that's relatively new coming out to the market is the Calibra Bio, which is their calcium aluminate cement, which is
from who?
From Dent Supply.
Oh, Dent Supply has Calibra Bio.
Mm-hmm.
Sirona.
And
Dent Supply Sirona.
Sirona.
You forgot the marriage.
Yeah.
So that'd be three for Zirconia, 3M's Reliax, Fuji's Fujisem, and Dent Supply Sirona's Calibra Bio.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So most of the time with a first molar, if I would just use an RMGI. There's a couple that, the one time where, so I've got one that I've got to do tomorrow, where I'm going to bond a Zirconia crown, and that's, for me, that happens a lot for these second molars. So when I got these second molars that are real short, and I got kind of a limited occlusal space, so I'm picking Zirconia because I've got kind of this limited material thickness. I want something really strong, so I'm using Zirconia. But then my prep is just short because I'm trying to keep things relatively equigingival. So I'm thinking I don't have great retention in my prep, and I picked Zirconia as my restorative material, and those ones I'll bond. So if I'm doing, because people, there's a lot of controversy over can you bond or can you not bond Zirconia. I think that you can, but it's not like I do it for every case. I just do it when I need it, and that's generally when I need it the most, is for these short second molar crowns. So yeah, and then I guess if you want me to go back with the Emacs bonding, an Emacs crown, so do a lot of these. We're starting to get into some of these more conservative preparations with these. I think next week I have to deliver this onlay that we're doing it with the Zirconia. An Emacs onlay. And for those ones, the lab's generally etching it for me, so they're applying the hydrofluoric acid etch. Try and clean it out with phosphoric acid, applying silane primer, and then we've got, as far as with the cement options, if you're going to be bonding a crown, I think of them in 2 categories, like how involved you want to get. There's the ones that have are self-adhesive, so you don't have to apply any kind of primer onto the tooth, like the Panavia SA is popular, or Unisem 2 are 2 pretty good self-adhesive resin cements. And then there's the one that's kind of a bump up, where you apply some kind of primer onto the tooth surface before you apply the cement, like the Reliax Ultimate with Scotch Bond Universal on the tooth. That's one that we have here at the school that we use a lot. So, I kind of think of them in those two different levels.
Man, love your amazing mind. This is great. So I hate to say this to you because it sounds commercial, and these I called you, you didn't call me. Nobody pays me money to talk about anything on my show. But what are the different brands of zirconia? I mean, there's powders, there's all kinds of things, and what are your thoughts on the different brands?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, I guess taking a step back, it's kind of interesting to look to, even another step back up. When I was practicing up in Chicago, I think one of the neatest things I ever did was I called up the lab I was working for DSO actually, and I called up the lab they were using, and I asked them if I could just go by and see the lab to see how things are done. And it was interesting because my grandfather was a laboratory technician, and I, used to go into the garage and see him working. So I thought a lab would be, full of a bunch of sweaty guys working like my, grandpa, making dentures and waxing stuff up. And I just went out, there was a whole bunch of machines just milling things, printing things. So it was a really educational experience for me to learn how my restorations were being made, and they were really nice about showing me how they did everything. So zirconia, the way that it's manufactured is milled. What that means, it starts off with this thing. It's kind of like this big, oversized hockey puck of white powder, and they take that, they put it into a machine, and they drill it down into a crown shape. It's kind of this oversized crown shape, and then they put it into a furnace to sinter it. And those pucks of zirconia can be made by many different manufacturers. It's interesting, like with lithium disilicate, people know the brand names, like they know Emacs or Celtra Press or Obsidian or any of the types of lithium disilicate materials or lithium silicate materials. But zirconia, there's so many different types of zirconia that many people, I wonder if they know the name of their zirconia. I think that there are some differences in in a high quality zirconia versus zirconia that's just bought on the internet somewhere. Some of the things are the way that they actually fabricate the disc. So it starts off as like a powder, and they actually have to press it into that shape. And so how they press it into that shape can affect the deformation of the eventual crown that's being made. So one of the things that I think is a differentiating factor between different brands of zirconia is if you can either press it from the top and the bottom, and they call that uniaxial pressing, or you could put it in like a Ziploc bag in a pressurized kind of container and press it from all directions, and that's called isostatic pressing. So if you have something that's isostatic pressed, then all those particles are more evenly condensed, and so what that could ultimately translate to us as the clinician is, let's say you have I had this happening one time, 4-unit bridge, went to go try it on, and the thing wouldn't fit. I was making adjustments after adjustment. It was a headache. It was expensive lab bill, so I really wanted to make it fit, and just never fit. Sent it back to the lab. Same impression, everything like that, just confirmed about which material they were using, got the crown back, and it, with a little bit of adjustments, the thing seated. So I don't know. I mean, that was one anecdotal experience, but that's if you have a puck that isn't pressed well, the disadvantage is that it could lead to some deformation when they actually go and sinter that restoration. So I think that's one differentiating factor between a well-made and not well-made material. Also, another thing, getting a chance to, now in what I do, I get to visit actual dental manufacturing companies where they make stuff. And one of the things that impresses me with high-quality manufacturers is how much they do quality control. Like, I see them, they pull these things off the line and they go take them back to testing, and I keep, just to make one little testing specimen. I think, man, like, can you give me I hate to see them waste that, perfectly made product they just made to test it, but they do a lot of testing of the products to make sure that they're all kind of uniform and the sintering's even and they don't deform. So I think that's, another reason that, I feel better about going with a high quality manufacturer for something like zirconia. So
I love your amazing mind. You're a double doctor. You're a doctor of dental surgery and a PhD. That is amazing. We have so much in common. I asked my four boys on every summer on family vacations. We visited several dental manufacturing places. My dad did that when we were little. We used to. He loved the Six Flags Over Texas arenas, and when we would go to that city, we'd also go to anything available that would give tours, like car companies, Budweiser tours, all these things. And I tell these dentists, they want to learn how to place implants. And they think they got to fly across the country or fly to another country and drop all this money. And there's a periodontist 5 miles away that would teach them everything for free. Going down to the labs, I did that when I got a dental school. I'll never forget it. A German guy in Continental, and I called him up, and he told me to come down there. And it seems like, it's free. You would go down there and spend an hour, an afternoon, and you'd learn so much. I drove to Nogales, which is the largest removable partial framework lab in the world, and just one day down there I learned more about removable partial dentures being in a place that makes 1,000 a day than I did in all my years of dental school and college. And these companies, it's just amazing how you can walk into one of those companies with your 4 kids in a what is the thing called, the pushing a baby in there, and they'll just a stroller, and they'll just spend hours with you teaching you all of this stuff. And I also think the human mind, when you're trying to teach my granddaughter, or I got 5 grandkids, when you're trying to teach them show, touch, feel, just learns so much faster. And when a dentist goes into a lab and they show, touch, feel, you get to see your crown impression. But to go to the table and see 1,000 impressions in a row sent in and look at the model, you just learn so much fast. So kudos to you. When you see zirconia break, what are you actually seeing? Is it when they're adjusting it, cementing it, doing adjunction? Is it in bridges? Where do you see it break?
Oh, that's a great question. So that was one of the fun things that when I first started teaching here at UAB is I went and talked to some of the pros faculty, and I said, if anything fails in the dental school, I'd be really interested to see the failed restorations, to see what happened. And so I got a couple of these cases back. And I remember one of the first ones, they have to do 35 crowns to graduate at UAB. And I went downstairs, and it was one of the dental students, 4th-year dental students, and I think it was crown number 34 and crown number 35. She was going to try them in, and they fractured. So she's like crying, and I'm all with my camera, all excited to take the pictures of these failed restorations. But what had happened was it was a second molar. It was on the distal marginal ridge, where the manufacturers will tell you can get 0.6 millimeters of 0.6 millimeters is their minimum occlusal reduction that you can get. So this was probably reduced 0.6 millimeters, and then after the adjustments were made, the crown was something like 0.4 millimeters thick. So it was after adjustment during trying where this thing fractured, and so we kind of changed the recommendations at UAB to try to get everybody to do a millimeter occlusal reduction with their zirconia crowns, which built in a little bit of room for error in case there were any of these adjustments made where they got to be a little bit too thin. So that was one place. But honestly, not that many zirconia single unit crowns have fractured within the school. I just haven't seen it that much. What I have seen more of is fractured of fixed partial dentures. So with the fixed partial denture, the connector is supposed to be, they have this thing called the rule of 27, which means that if you multiply the height or square the height of your connector and multiply it by the width of your connector. An easier way for me to think of it is basically the most important thing is the height of my connector, and I need to have 3 millimeters of height of my connector. So, and usually a lot of times the problem with the height is coming off of the more distal abutment. So if I've got a Schwartz, if I'm using a second molar as a abutment tooth, then if it's real short and I don't have 3 millimeters, I'm not going to be able to have that 3 millimeter connector height, and so then probably a zirconia bridge is not the best solution for that.
Are you talking about for like all on fours?
No, I'm talking about for just the fixed partial denture, like a bridge.
Oh, okay.
A bridge. For like a 3-handed bridge, if you can't get the connector, the junction between the ponic and the
You know, there's a lot of extremists in dentistry. Like, there's a lot of dentists who say, I will not do a bridge. It's like, well, you're a doctor. The average doctor has 2,000 patients. You're saying you have 2,000 patients and not even one of them has an indication for a bridge. You hear it all the time with general dentists who do ortho and say they will never do an orthodontic extraction case. Really? 7.5 billion people, and according to 23andMe, we're all a bunch of mixed Heinz 57 mutts. You're telling me there's never a mom and dad that get married and make a baby that's got too big of teeth and too small of jaws? I mean, it's just extremist thinking. Even amalgam. I mean, even amalgam. I'm out here in Arizona where there's just a gazillion retirees from up north, and if they have dementia, they have Alzheimer's, they don't even know their name, and they get an on average 1 root surface cavity per month in the nursing home, and you're going to do that with inert plastic composite when the amalgam. You're a PhD. I'll shut up. What would you do if it was your grandma, complete Alzheimer's, didn't know your name was Nate, and had a bunch of root surface cavities? Would you do amalgams or would you do direct composites, and which one would last longer?
It's funny because my grandmother has Alzheimer's, doesn't know my name, and she actually lives in Scottsdale. So it was like a perfect.
Oh my God, I want to meet her.
But you know, for her, the one thing I keep on thinking about with her is, I mean, she doesn't have access to dental care. So like with her, the one thing I keep on thinking about is about silver diamine fluoride, because I didn't have a chance to take a look in her mouth last time I was up there and I saw her, but I can imagine that she doesn't have dentures, she's got a full mouth of teeth, and for her with all those root caries, I'm thinking silver diamine fluoride, because we can't get her. I mean, to move her, to take her to a dentist's office is just impractical. So just due to limited mobility problems, but you know, I keep on thinking about silver diamine fluoride for her. I mean, also, I mean, if you had to pick between amalgam and composite, I agree. If you can't get good isolation, I think that composite is a bad idea. But for that type of patient, I keep on thinking about that just being a great indication for silver diamine fluoride.
So are you it's kind of funny because because the 31 years I've been at dental school, you know, there weren't any arguments in pediatric dentistry. I mean, that was a group. It's not like TMJ where every camp has a different view. But now the pedodontists actually have a controversy with silver diamine fluoride. Are you a big fan of that? I mean, what do you think is better, silver diamine fluoride on your grandmother's if she gets a root surface cavity, or physically remove it with a burr and place resin modified glass ionomer or amalgam?
I mean, I think for a long-term solution, if we could place something like an RMGI on for that root surface caries, but I just, you know, for her, I keep on thinking, you know, it would take me 2 minutes to apply silver diamine fluoride on a lot of those root caries surfaces versus, you know, I could be done right in a nursing home versus having to try to take her out and do the restorative work on her. So for me, I feel like SDF, it just, you know, even if the RMGI is a more permanent solution for people like her, it would make a lot more sense to be able to do the SDF. But yeah, we use I'm a fan of SDF. For me, since I don't see kids anymore, it took me a while to figure out where am I going to use SDF in an adult population. One application is for geriatric patients. The other one where I've used it is, so in my faculty practice, I have some patients that have come in with just rampant caries with maybe 28 surfaces of caries, and so you know, with faculty practice, you don't have, you know, it's not like a full-time practice. I'm seeing these patients very slowly, so I'll do SDF everywhere, kind of to arrest everything, and then restore over it with GI or with composite. So, so yeah, and for those patients, it's worked great. So I've become a fan of that material.
Well, if you ever, you know, there's always Mobile Dentistry of Arizona. If your grandma ever needs anything in Scottsdale, Mobile Dentistry of Arizona.com. Mark Hank, Gregory Pfeiffer. They got a hygienist, Ann Ross. Renee Taylor. They're and then if you're ever in town visiting her and you need a dental office, you own mine 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. If you ever need to see her. So how old is your grandma?
She was born in 1930.
Wow.
So yeah, 80.
It's almost 90.
88. Yeah.
Yeah, that is amazing. Silver diamond fluoride is it's interesting times. Let's just say that, interesting times. So we still do bridges. Do you think a dentist should have amalgam in their office, or do you think it's just too controversial? It's half mercury. You don't find mercury in a multivitamin. Would you just axe it out, and replace it with resin modified glass ionomer or silver diamine fluoride, or is there still an indication for the average dentist in America? Well, let me ask you this: as a DMD PhD, if it was your boy, he's 6 years old, and the 6-year molar is the most of. I mean, it's the unluckiest tooth in the mouth. I mean, like I say, it's the tooth that's going to get an MOD filling, a crown, a root canal extracted, replace an implant, and your boy, to start this whole thing, gets an occlusal cavity on number 3. Would you put a direct composite there, or would you put an amalgam? And which one? And how long would an occlusal composite last versus an occlusal amalgam? If it was your own 6-year-old boy.
Oh, Howard, that's such a hard question. I mean, to predict the longevity of those restorations. I mean, I'm not opposed to amalgam, even though, we do a lot of studies about bonding. And when I practiced, we had amalgam. I think that composite is a tricky material to use, and in order for it to do well, you really have to use it well. And I thought I'd learned a lot about placing composite restorations when I graduated, and then after I practiced for a while, and then when I come back, and now, the more I see, I realize that there's still so much to learn about just doing something as simple as a class 2 composite restoration to do it really, really well. So, I mean, from caries removal to isolation to the bonding agent to how you place your restoration to how it's finished. So, I think that, I think maybe amalgam is a little bit less technique sensitive. And it's hard for me to argue. I see a lot of my patients come in that are in their 70s with these amalgams that have been in there for 40 years that are still functioning. So it's hard to argue against the benefits of amalgam. I mean, I would like to think that if it was, my 6-year-old or my kid coming in to have a restoration done on the 6-year molar, that I would be able to do a composite really, really well so that it would last as long as an amalgam restoration. But I don't know. As far as predicting the lifetime of the two, that's too hard of a question. I can't. I'd just be totally guessing.
And let me just remind people. I mean, we get emails on this show from countries all around the world, and I've been to a lot of those countries, and man, gosh, if you don't have a dental assistant, high-speed suction, rubber dams, isolation, and there's 2 million dentists on earth, and 1 million of them don't have the American operatory with a high-speed suction, a dental assistant, and if isolation is even remotely an issue, and it's posterior, especially on a boy. I get it with girls. I mean, girls just want tooth colored. It's just their thing. But for a boy, who hasn't brushed his teeth in 3 days and wears the same damn New Orleans Saints t-shirt 4 days in a row, I mean, on that molar, it's just I just think amalgam is so much better. But let's switch to burrs, because I remember the first time I had to cut off a zirconium crown. I thought the gods were cursing me. What is the best burrs for zirconium crowns? What if you got to do a root canal through a zirconia crown? What if you have to cut one off? Do you just have them bite down on a stick of dynamite, then leave the operatory, or how do you get them off?
So we did. So actually, they started this right before I started working here. But but then we continued this, and we have a machine downstairs. It's kind of a burr testing machine that we use to test a whole bunch of different burrs for cutting through zirconia. And the way the machine works is you've got this burr, you put in this turbine, and you press a piece of zirconia against it with a controlled force and time, and you just see if it makes a real deep cut in the zirconia, then it's a good burr, and if it doesn't really do anything, then it's not. It's not a good burr. So when we did that test, they just went and found 10 burrs. I think they ranged from very fine to coarse burrs. Some of them zirconia cutting burrs, just randomly put them in the machine and tested out a whole bunch of them. And there were two that tested really well. There was one from some company that I couldn't ever even find the website for again. And then there was this other one, which was this burr that was made by Comet. It was a zirconia cutting burr. And a lot of people say, oh, it has to be a fine diamond. This happened to be a coarse diamond, a zirconia cutting diamond. It was, I can't remember what it used to be called. They've changed the name of it now to something called 4ZR. And it's,
Comet does?
Again, a
4ZR?
Comet 4ZR. It's their cutting burr. And so we, again, I didn't really know much of anything about Comet at the time. And then we made this YouTube video about how we did the test and put it out there. And a bunch of people watched it because it was called How to Cut Off a Zirconia Crown or something like that.
Did you post that video on Dental Town?
I don't know. I don't think that I did. I think it's just on YouTube. But
how do I find it on YouTube? What's it called? What would I search?
think if you just Google How to Cut Off Zirconia Crown. And it's an older video. It just has shows how we did the test, and it shows that burr. And I don't know if it's coming up.
I got one. Would your name be on it?
Yeah, if you put Lawson and How to Cut Off a Zirconia
Put what?
Crown,
Put what?
Lawson, Lawson, and How to Cut Off a Zirconia Crown.
Okay, I'm putting on. How to Remove a Zirconia Crown by Nathaniel Lawson. Oh, Nate Lawson.
Oh, there it is.
This is back. My God, you got 26,000 views on that. Good luck. That's amazing. Yeah. So I'm subscribed to you on YouTube. Hell, you have 800 subscribers. That's huge in dentistry. I mean, most dental websites you go to have 3 people on their YouTube channel. But if you ever want to explode a video. Like on Dental Town, I love your signature. You have your Instagram link, so you can just go right to click that. But you should on what thread should I put that on? Should I reply to you? I'll just reply to that Bruxer Zirconia versus Zirconia, Bruxer Zirconia versus Zirconia thread. Are you familiar with that thread?
I am.
Yeah, Bruxer Zirconia versus Zirconia. That's kind of a weird. What is that about? What is there a difference between Bruxer Zirconia crowns and Zirconia crowns? Is Bruxer just a name brand of zirconia? Are the properties of both about the same? My lab charges more for the Bruxer versus Zirconia crowns. Curious as it's worth the increased price to contribute. So is using the Bruxer brand name from Glidewell, I guess this guy's saying it costs more at his lab than a generic zirconium crown. Is that a difference?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what we're going to a little bit earlier. Like if there was, if you're buying this puck, that white puck of zirconia from a brand name versus a generic, I think that there are some manufacturing advantages of going with a brand name. There's other brand names aside from Bruxer that are good. A lot of them are from companies that we know because they're also dental manufacturers like Curare Noritake that makes Panavia products. They make a zirconia, and 3M they make a zirconia, and Ivoclar makes a zirconia, and Dentsply makes a zirconia. So a brand name zirconia I think is going to be manufactured a little bit better, and you'll see differences in strength and possibly defects or also deformation of longer span stuff. So but I think actually one of the going back to the zirconia, I think one of the biggest thing if I had to go out and talk to a group of practicing dentists is knowing the difference between the second generation and third generation. So I was given a talk at a dental association 2 weeks ago, and I was talking all about this cubic zirconia and 5Y zirconia. And then I asked, is anybody using this? And nobody said anything. And then I hear like a voice from the back of the room, and it's their lab. And the lab was saying, yeah, actually, didn't you guys notice that all your zirconia started looking more translucent, a little bit nicer? He's like, I switched it out. So this is the stuff you're using now. And so I think it's important for people to realize the difference that there's the 3Y, it's stronger, it's wide opaque, but it's stronger. So that's the advantage of that. So that's what I would use for a posterior 3-unit bridge, or if I had limited occlusal clearance. And then the the newer stuff, the 5Y, the anterior zirconia is more translucent, but you lose a little bit in strength. So just realizing that there's a difference between those two types of zirconias.
Yeah, and back to extremism. Some of these people, you know, they got their AACD, their cosmetic dentists, all that stuff. That's really important to women. It's really important to people with high aesthetic needs, anterior teeth. Like the whole time I've been talking to you, I've been a dentist 31 years. I still haven't seen one of your molars. I see your Elvis Presley hair. I see all these good looks, but my gosh, when people are making aesthetic health compromises on posterior teeth in men and boys, where a dentist could talk to you for 40 days and 40 nights and never see your molar, I just don't get it. Like I have actually, at least once a decade, some woman, wants all porcelain, all that, but it's a second molar. I can barely get any reduction, and I just say it's maxillary, and I just say this needs to be a full gold crown. Do the full gold crown. And she's a patient 10 years later and still doesn't know she has a full gold crown. I am the only person, and maybe her ear, nose, and throat, and my assistant, that knows she has gold in her mouth. Material, there's a lot of emotions, and I want to speak to another emotion that's bothering me in dentistry. I see it all the time. Is when you're a PhD. I want you to weigh on this. They're unlike bonding agents. Like, I don't know if we'll ever be better than the 3rd generation bonding agent. I mean, just your regular Bisco or whatever. But these people are saying, well, I don't want to do 2 steps. I just want a 1 step. It's like, how would you like to be getting a bypass? And the cardiovascular surgeon says, well, I don't want to do a 2-step stent. I want to do a 1. I mean, come on, dude, you're a doctor. Are you really going to change materials because of 1 step versus 2? Do you think sometimes there's a real compromise in trying to do everything too fast and easy, and sometimes it's just better to do an extra step?
Yeah, that's interesting. So there's this thing called have you heard of this thing called the ACE panel? It's the ADA clinical evaluators. So they replaced professional product report with this ACE panel now. So it surveys dentists. I think one of the first ones they did was about composites, and they did one about bioactives, and the most recent one they did was about adhesives. So they surveyed the ADA members about what type of adhesive, what generation of adhesive that they're using, and it's about 75% of dentists are using the single bottle, either a self-etch or total etch single bottle, and it's only about 25% of dentists are using the 2-bottle systems, which I wasn't aware of that data before. I think that there's these newer universal adhesives. We've done a lot of work. We've got a 5-year clinical with Scotch-Bond Universal where it actually competes with a 2-bottle system. It competes with the multi-purpose as far as retention rates and what we call ring around the restoration, that marginal discoloration. But when I sit and I think about it really hard, can we ever have a 1-bottle system that's as good as a 2-bottle system? That actually, it's funny you bring that up, because I've been thinking about that a lot. Because I think the disadvantage of the 1-bottle system, they say, is longevity. Because if you've got a 2-bottle system, you've got the primer in the first step. That's this hydrophilic step, and then you've got a hydrophobic adhesive that goes on top of it. And when you have a 1-bottle system, you have to usually have to put some kind of heme in there, making it somewhat hydrophilic layer, which can attract water and eventually lead to degradation of that bond. So I don't know, are 1 bottles going to be as good as the 2 bottles? I don't know, but it seems like that's the way the market's going. That's where about, again, 75% of the dentists in that ACE panel survey were
same question about incremental layers of a posterior composite. Are these new filler up in one gulp?
So yeah, they posed the same question for the ACE panel, and it was actually surprising to me to see that only 25% of the dentists in that ACE panel report were doing the bulk fill composites. And I just, in my filling with bulk fill composites, I use bulk fill composites for primarily, all of my posterior restorations. With the bulk fill composites, they're a little bit more translucent. They allow a light to go through usually 4 to 5 millimeter depth of cure. But just because they're bulk fill doesn't mean that I'm going to mash it in there no matter how big the prep is and then cure from the top and call it a day. I would rather, it just means that I can get away with a little bit thicker increments. So we're doing a clinical trial. We started measuring the depth of the boxes that we had in this clinical trial, and found out that there was about 20% of the restorations we were doing had a box that was 6 millimeters or deeper. So that would mean, a traditional 2 millimeter cure composite, that we'd have to be looking at like 4 increments of composite. And I don't know about you, Howard, but I feel like, who measures whoever measures their preps, and who's going to place 4 increments of composite. So my thing with bulk fills is it just allows you to have larger increments. So you could have I usually I'll do 1 on the floor, I'll do 1 to build up the marginal ridge, so this is for class 2, and then I'll do 1 for my lingual wall and 1 for the buccal wall, and that way, when I'm using a bulk fill composite, I feel pretty good that even if there's part of that increment that's 4 millimeters deep, at least it's getting cured. So that's kind of my feeling on the bulk fills.
Well, dude, congratulations on getting 28,000 people to watch that YouTube video. I'm gonna post it on Dentaltown. So on Dentaltown, when you go to a YouTube video and you hit share, it shows you a copy of the link. But if you click the next button, embed, it gives you the code, and then you copy that code. Then when you go to Dentaltown, when you make a post, you hit the YouTube button, and everybody that does that, their YouTube channel explodes, because you got 250,000 people on Dentaltown, and Google says there's 1.6 billion websites. Half of them, 800 million, have monthly active users, and so there's a lot of noise out there on the internet. So by posting your YouTube videos on Dentaltown, you get a ton of people subscribe to it, like you're doing with your Instagram. And you should tell, yeah. So, my gosh, I can't believe we've already been talking for an hour. I could talk to you for 40 days and 40 nights. What else do you think, what else, if we go to a little overtime, what else do you think these young 25-year-old dentists that just walked out of dental school need to know about dental materials?
Ooh, I think we've covered them. The main things we talk about are ceramics, cements, adhesives, and composites. I think we've covered those all pretty well. And one of the things that I thought about that we didn't get to finish the conversation about was we were talking about, the way that our restorations look. You had mentioned something about how you had never seen my molars when we were talking, and then as dentists, we have this need to make our restorations look really nice, and some of it I think comes from like this Instagram and this social media where we have these great pictures of the dentistry we're doing, and sometimes to me that can be overwhelming, where I see these restorations that look ridiculously nice. You wonder if they're photoshopped, you wonder how they do it, but in other ways it can actually be good. I think dental photography has been one of the things that helped me grow the most as the clinician. That's came from having to do these clinical trials where we took pictures of all of our work, and looking at those pictures, at first it was mortifying. It was terrible. I saw all these lines, all these things, all these contours I didn't know were there. And when we talk about the technique sensitivity of doing direct composite restorations, I learned so much from those pictures and showing them to other people and the other people that I work with here at the dental school, and helping me improve my composite restorations. But yeah, that's it. And then like I said, I have a team of guys that I work with on that Dental Tube Instagram account. I've got a guy who's a board certified prosthodontist named Celine Arce, the head operative here, a guy named Augusto Robles, and then a master dental ceramist named Hernan Lazaro Villa. And so it's a kind of a group effort, and we've had a lot of fun with that Instagram account. It's a combination of materials and photography and dentistry. So
you do it real well. I hope you get John O. Burgess to come on the show. You think you can ever talk him into it?
I thought he did. Has he not? Has he never been on the show?
No, he hasn't been on the show. He was a legend. Hell, he was a legend when I got out of school. He's just an amazing man. Do you see him much?
Yeah, so we actually started working together. It's been like 14 or 15 years now. So I met him when I was in college. And he's the one that brought me here. He's been a great mentor. He's the one that brought me to Alabama, the one that got me this job here. So he's actually, I think he's right across the hall right now in his office. So yeah, he's just a really terrific guy and taught me, most of everything I know.
Well, you got to tell him to come on the show because I just love that guy. Just love him to death. But man, thank you so much. I know you're a busy guy, and my gosh, it's not every day we get to have someone come on who's a double doctor, a DMD, and a PhD. Kudos to you, man. And thank you so much for all your posting on Dental Town and Dental Tubules on Instagram. And his website is Dr. Nate Lawson, Nate Lawson.com. And next time you're out and visiting your grandma in Scottsdale, like I say, if you want to have a hamburger, we'll do it. Or if you need a dental office, just bring her to my place.
That'd be awesome. Thank you so much, Howard. Big fan of the show, and thank you so much. It's a real honor to be on here. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Nate. Have a rockin' hot day.